Time being 7 o'clock, I call the Hastings City Council meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and let the roll reflect that we have a full council with us tonight. Council members, are there any corrections to the November 12th special meeting and the council meeting? Okay. Comments from the audience at this time? We'd hear comments from the audience. Anyone wish to speak to? And no one on Zoom. All right. Council items to be considered. Council, any items to be considered? Okay. Council, we have been advised to take item number 7 is not ready for consideration tonight, so we should remove that from the agenda. With that, Council, I would accept a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda. Council member, I'll go by hands, Council member House and Council member Fox. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. That motion prevails. Tonight under Community Development, we have a first reading to amend the City Code Chapters 34.03, 95.98, 117, and 155 Cannabis regulations. And we have with us our City Attorney, Corey Land. Welcome, Corey.
Here, which microphone?
Oh, you can just flip right through here.
Yep. The council is over here, so I want to address you with this microphone, if that's okay. All right, so we have had 2 workshops. Planning Commission's had a public hearing, zoning ordinance, city code revisions. This is a first reading tonight, but for the listening audience, those in TV land who don't know what all of this new cannabis stuff is, we're going to give a little bit, not nearly the in-depth discussion we've had in the past, but just a little bit of a summary of why we're doing this and what's going on. We're going to have one zoning ordinance amendment that addresses both the existing uses that we have, kind of updating the language and then incorporating the uses into our code. Then we have 3 city code amendments. The first is to repeal the licensing provision that we have today for CBD, which is the old version of cannabinoids, the low-potency hemp edible products today. That's what they're known as. And then adopt a registration process instead, because that's what the legislature has authorized cities to do. The Office of Cannabis Management will be taking over all of licensing of cannabis and lower-potency hemp edible products. So the cities cannot do that because they have completely taken over that area. But they are allowing cities, if they choose to register these businesses. So that's what we're recommending, is enacting a registration ordinance. In addition, because there's a registration process, there will be some staff time to implement that. There will be compliance checks that have to be done of the retail establishments. So there's a registration fee that can be imposed. In addition, there is a special event organizer permit, not a registration, but a permit. So that, again, staff time. So we will be imposing a fee for that as well. And we'll have a permit process that's sort of baked into the registration ordinance because it's an exception to registration, but it needs to be addressed as to what those permit applications will need to look like. So there's the permit fee as well. Then, in addition, because there are some tangential issues that we want you to be aware of with cannabis uses, especially with manufacturing, but also sometimes with the retail establishments or cultivation, there tends to be an odor, not just from the plants, but from the process. And so we want to make sure that these businesses are good neighbors, as well as any business, frankly, that is a manufacturing kind of business, that they are not producing an odor that is, offensive to its neighbors. So the odor ordinance is not strictly designed for cannabis, just the timing of it seems to be a good time to implement an odor ordinance. So that is on your agenda as well. Just to refresh your memory, we're not dealing with the zoning provisions with the business names. That's a licensing provision for the Office of Cannabis Management to go through of the 13 different licenses that they will be licensing. When you're talking about land use, your planning, your zoning, you're talking about the specific use on a specific parcel. So what we did as kind of an analysis is go through what are the 13 businesses, the licenses, and what do they do? Then they have different uses behind those licenses. We've kind of categorized them into the lower potency version, which is the current CBD product that is lower than 0.3% THC in the products. And there's different dosages, all laid out in the legislature, but it's basically the legal product today that is being sold as edibles and beverages. So those are the lower potency hemp edibles. They come in both, as I said, beverages and edibles, so that's one category. Then there's the cannabis, which is the over 0.3% THC per product. So there's cannabis retail, otherwise known typically as a dispensary. Those would be kind of a standalone business. And then there's the manufacturing, which could be either the lower potency manufacturing or it could be the adult use cannabis manufacturing. We'll deal with those uses separately. And then there's the cultivation, indoors and outdoors. As you can see, there's a lot of different kinds of uses, but the general categories are your retail, your manufacturing or industrial kinds of uses, and your ag uses or farming cultivation uses. So then we take those uses and we plug them into the zoning districts. And so this is the overall chart, if it was in one big giant chart, which eventually it will be when we revise the code. But this is what it would look like in the categories. For example, the lower potency hemp edible beverages. The council discussed this and determined those should be permitted uses. If you have an off-sale or on-sale liquor license, that is a permitted use. And other than those businesses needing to register with the city so that we know that they're selling those products and conduct compliance checks, they will not need any land use approval. They won't need any approval from the zoning ordinance. And these are the zoning districts in which those uses exist today. So we're not making any new territory here. The lower potency hemp edible retail, not associated with a liquor license. So these are the ones that are sold typically at another kind of retail store as an extra product. Tobacco stores, for example. There are other kinds of stores, massage therapy places. They will sell sometimes these hemp edible products. So these are the zoning districts where they will be allowed to do that. The C3, the DC, and the C4 zoning districts. Then there's the cannabis retail, which is the dispensaries, also in those same zoning districts, but those would be typically a standalone store because of all the security requirements. I don't think they're going to be selling, just your average other kinds of products within. They're not going to be selling gum. They're just going to be selling true cannabis products. The manufacturing, kind of the industrial, is going to be in the I1 and I2, appropriately placed. The lower potency manufacturing must be associated with a brewery or a distillery. So this is those zoning districts where those are allowed today. So again, we're not trying to make new territory here for the existing things. And the reason that lower potency manufacturing is allowed at breweries and distilleries is because you're taking a liquid to a liquid. You can't mix alcohol and cannabis. It must be like a seltzer kind of product. So it's taking a tincture of a cannabis product and mixing it up in a vat of seltzer. And so it really doesn't have any kind of tangential issues that it's going to be bothering its neighbors. You won't even know they're doing it. And then cannabis wholesale is only allowed today in the I1 and I2, so we felt it appropriate to allow cannabis wholesale there as well. And then the cultivator, if it's an indoor or outdoor, so indoor would be through some kind of a greenhouse, a hoop house, or even just a fully enclosed building. Or an outdoor, like a farming operation. Those would be in the I1, I2, or the ag districts. So let's look at the maps. You've seen these before. This is where the lower potency hemp edible retail sales, and then the manufacturing, brewery, or distillery happen to be in the same locations other than, I didn't show them on the map, other than the I1, they're also allowed there. So just to mention that in the C3, C4, DC, lower potency edible retail sales, like at your tobacco shops, like at your chiropractors or your massage therapy places, those will be allowed in these zoning districts. There's a 500-foot buffer between uses, but otherwise there's no other buffers. And when I say buffers, state law allows you to put distance restrictions from schools, from daycares, from parks where minors are, the attraction of a minor could occur, like a playground. But there are no buffer zones other than from each other, just so they don't congregate all, in one central block, just to kind of keep a little bit of distance between them. So the buffer zones for cannabis, as I said, you can impose the 1,000 feet between uses, which is what we're recommending, 500 feet from schools, 500 from residential treatment facilities, so these would be overnight treatment facilities, 500 feet from residential properties, just again to protect the residential from a more commercial use or manufacturing use. Now, we did remove the 1,000 feet from daycares in a commercial zone. It's allowed by state law, but you, at the last workshop, decided that maybe that buffer zone was a little too restrictive. 1,000 feet from an attraction in a park. Now, we did make some exceptions to that, and we have to make some decisions for some of these as well. So what you determined, and the Planning Commission recommended, and the council agreed, they would be exempt from the downtown core, very geographic located district. We have geographic boundaries for, it's not all of the downtown core zoning district, but it's parts of it. So there's an exemption from the park buffer for that. We reduced it to 500 feet for the manufacturing uses. And then we were looking at options for the buffer zones for the retail. And what I think one idea that was brilliant was to stop the buffers at highways. I mean, you have two very, very large highways. Why make the buffer cross that distance? So we'll take a look at the two options. One is to keep it at 1,000 feet for the park attraction at 1,000 feet, but stopping at the highways. And the other is to look at what the map looks like when it's a 500-foot distance. So I have those options for you. So the original version of the map looked like this. And as you can see, even though you wanted it in the C3, C4, and the downtown core, it pretty much covered up a lot of the red and the darker red that you wanted to see these uses allowed. So that's why you requested a couple other options. So option number 2, so this was the original. Option number 2 is where we've stopped the buffers at the green buffer. So this is the park buffer at the freeways or at the highways. So at Highway 55 and Highway 61. And as you can see, the central corridor along Highway 61 is pretty much opened up. And this is with the 1,000-foot buffer from the attraction of the park. So the central 61 is opened up a lot, and it even opened up a lot of the Highway 55 commercial. So I think it accomplished the council's goal. If you wanted to go even farther, here's option 3, and I've circled the parcels that have opened up between 2 and 3. So it moved from, if you can just take a look at the bottom circle along Highway 61 there, you can see half of it's covered up in a green bubble, and now all of it is opened up. So just as one example. So it did open up a few spots on Highway 55, not that many, a couple more along Highway 61. Again, just by reducing the park buffer to a 500-foot as opposed to 1,000 feet. So this is one the council needs to choose. Do you want to go option 1, which is the most restrictive? Option 2, which is a 1,000-foot buffer, still opens up a lot of it, or option 3, which opens up even more. And I might remind you that we do have, in the registration portion of the program, we put the cap on the dispensaries at 1 per every 12,500 people that you have, residents that you have. So right now, you're only required to have 1. So all this does is open up all of these properties for that 1 to operate. But once that 1 operates, you don't have to allow another one until you get up to 25,000 people. So it would open it up, but again, I think either 2 or 3 accomplished what the council's goal was, which was to allow more opportunities for this type of use to locate. So I'm going to pause for a second so we can kind of figure out which map you want to go with.
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. Council? Well, Councilmember Lightfoot.
Well, heck. So appreciate this, thank you. We talked about this in our last meeting, and we all were like, we saw one big green blob basically over the city, which we, as a council, one of the things we agree on, a lot of things we don't, but one of the things we do agree on is we don't want to make it harder to do business in our community, right? That's been an ongoing thing that we've talked about, and we want to make the process easier. We want to be more transparent. So to, Counselor, to your point, you said one dispensary per 12,500 people. So that's the state requirements. Please explain that piece a little bit further. And then in that, the reminder is, do we think somebody's going to want to open a dispensary here? Yeah, probably, right? How does that process work if we get additional applications
So,
or business
yep,
requests?
two things. Let me clarify. The state law says cities may choose to have a cap. You don't have to. You don't have to have a cap at all. If you choose to have a cap, you have to allow one dispensary for every 12,500 residents. So I just copied the language from the statute that said you will allow one for every 12,500 residents.
It doesn't limit us.
Well, you could,
can have more.
yeah, you could allow more.
Does that, in essence, then allow for, let's say, communities like Vermillion and Meesville and New Trier, for them to be able to say, no, we don't want a dispensary in our community? Is that kind of what that's designed for, or what is?
No, the state law says you can't prohibit the
Okay.
use. But there's also a county cap. So once the county reaches one for every 12,500 residents of the county, then a city could start to say, no, the county has reached its quota, if you will, of dispensaries, because Egan may allow, who knows, they may allow 20. I don't know. If you do get a larger community that has the capacity to have more dispensaries, then once you reach that one per every 12,500 for the county-wide, then cities can start to say no. But until it reaches that, they can't say no.
Okay, great information. All of that being said, are we looking for a motion to move one of these options forward?
Yeah, well, I don't need a motion, but I need a consensus as to which one version you want, the 1,000 feet or the 500 feet, so I know how to, the ordinance as written today is 1,000 feet with the buffer, with the highway buffer zones.
Based on the information that you've presented to us over the last number of meetings, my personal recommendation would be option 3. We're not talking 3 dispensaries, we're not talking 8 dispensaries, we're not talking 10 dispensaries. Right now, we are literally talking about one dispensary and where can they put it, right? My recommendation, and again, I'm only one of 7 here, but my goal is option 3. Thanks for this information. I know it's been a horrible process. The state hasn't been very vocal in what's going to happen. There's not a lot of direction, and we've kind of been chasing our tail on this, and we don't want to be in that position. So I really appreciate your making this all make sense to us. So again, that would be my recommendation.
Yep. And Your Honor, I know we still have to figure that out, but let me just put one more answer, because you also asked, what if you have 2 people at your door? I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I don't think realistically, I don't think 2 people will be ready at the same time, because they're going to have to go through their Office of Cannabis Management process. They will then pre-approve those applications. It will then come to the city for a zoning letter. My guess is nobody bothered to check with the city to find out if they comply with zoning. So they're going to have to go through a conditional use permit. So if they get all their stuff together for a conditional use permit, again, I can't imagine there are going to be 2 people knocking on your door at exactly the same time with the right process and all done and ready to go. So I don't think it's going to happen. If it does, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Thank you, Councilmember Lightfoot. Councilmember Fox?
Thank you, Your Honor. I totally agree with Councilmember Liefeld, particularly because of what we've talked about in meetings in the past and how we've framed this as business model for allowing, not refusing, taking the opportunity to put this one dispensary that we cannot refuse in place. It just allows a little bit more space. What if they own the right thing at the right time and it's the right business and they can figure out a conditional use permit and work through our zoning, which we're cleaning up very nicely. But so I agree, option 3. I also want to be really clear that we do hope that people want to make businesses here and want to bring business to Hastings, because industry and our local business economy is going to be what carries us through in the next many years. But I would like to point out all of the work that Councilor Land has put into making sure that our voices are being heard, public safety's voices are being heard, and our committee voices are being heard, so that we have really strong standards for business, so that when the right business comes to play in Hastings, they will be good actors and good arbiters of this new industry, new ancient industry. So we're really grateful for that. But we do want to see business, and there's a lot of opportunity in this corridor that we will be talking about, or future councils will be talking about in many years to come. And hopefully we can fill vacant spaces, and now we have more opportunity to fill those spaces with option 3.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Your Honor. Corey, thank you so much for all of the work that you've put into this and the multiple meetings. It is very much appreciated. I know that this is not an easy task. I, too, am in support of option 3. Something that I want our residents to know, too, is that there are no buffers or boundaries on anything like this for alcohol or for guns. And so this is exclusive to cannabis. So we do want to make sure that we are keeping areas open for some businesses without making it so restrictive that there's not any area for one business to go to, which is why I'm in support of this option, but it does still allow for safety areas.
Thank you, Councilmember House. Councilmember Lightfoot.
First, Councilmember House, thank you for bringing up that there are not buffers like this for alcohol consumption or purchasing or gun purchasing. I completely slipped my mind, and I think that is a food for thought for people to just sort of hear and go, okay, and then just, move on. So I would like to take this opportunity, then make a motion to move, no?
I don't need one.
Okay.
Yep, as long as I'm seeing enough head nods.
But I really
We'll go
want to
with the
make a motion. I wrote it down. Fine. Fine.
Hold that thought. Okay. So I will modify the ordinance when on final reading to say 500 feet. Now, cannabis manufacturing, cultivation, and warehousing, again, only allowed in the I-1 and I-2. This map did not change. So it's the same one you discussed last time. And then cultivation, again, just adding the ag, no buffer zones, just 1,000 feet between uses. We don't necessarily want all of these to be, again, all taking up all of your ag. So a conditional use permit will be required, but otherwise that map is the same as well. So moving on then to the city code amendments. Again, there's a registration process, the fee schedule, and the odor ordinance. Now we can talk about businesses because we're talking about the licenses that will be issued by Office of Cannabis Management that then will be forwarded to the city for a registration. As we've discussed before, the Office of Cannabis Management will process these applications, make sure that the license applicant qualifies for that particular business license. After they get through that pre-approval process, they will send a zoning letter. We get these zoning letters all the time with a property owner that wants to, or a potential buyer that wants to buy a property. They want to know if the use that they want to put on that property is allowed. It's just called a zoning letter, so we assume that the Office of Cannabis Management will be sending the city a zoning letter saying, is this property or this business allowed on that property? Hopefully, that license applicant did their due diligence, went to the city first, got their conditional use permit, and then we can say yes. But if not, we will say no, and here's the deficiency. They will have to go back and correct that deficiency, and once they get their conditional use permit, then we can say yes. And now they will get their official piece of paper license from the Office of Cannabis Management, march over to Kelly at the city clerk's office and say, I'm ready to register. So now we need a registration process. So that's what this whole timeline is, will involve. City council approval is required for the registration, so it's not going to go, we haven't quite figured out if this will be a consent agenda item, maybe the first few we want to discuss. I'm not sure. We don't know what all this is going to look like or how it's going to unfold. So we'll just play it by ear. But it will require council fingerprints on it. In the ordinance, I put the registration term would be consistent with our license term, which is the calendar year. Well, Kelly pointed out that in the FAQs, not in a rule, not in the law, but in the FAQs from the Office of Cannabis Management, they said their license term will run whenever it gets approved. So it could be mid-year, it could be end of year, it could be January 1, probably not. So it doesn't make sense for us to have a different registration term because they're always going to need to then update with the current license that they have. So we're just going to have to keep track. When these businesses come and register with us, we're just going to have to calendar it that's their registration term. And it might be, March 15th to, March 14th of the next year. Fine. We'll figure it out. There aren't that many today. Obviously, we know that there aren't that many low-potency hemp edible places that have a registration, or they have a license today, but a registration tomorrow. There will be the alcohol places that do, anybody with a liquor license, so we'll have to add those to the list. And then if we end up with a manufacturing or dispensary or cultivation, we'll have to just keep track of those. So a little bit of a logistic issue, but we'll figure it out. So the ordinance will be modified because Kelly notified me of that cute little, again, it's an answer to a question, but we don't know where that rule is going to show up or what that's going to look like in the end. But I'll change that for final reading. Registrations are non-transferable from person to person, so they can't be sold. That's important. That people don't, it's not an automatic pass. Just because I have a registration, I can sell that right. They have to come in and get a new registration. And you can't move it from place to place. We approved that location. We didn't approve you to just move it to another location of your choosing. We will have fees in there, and there's a little bit of funkiness with the fees. Obviously, there's caps, which I outlined for you last time, and I have a slide on that as well. But the initial fee must also be accompanied by their first annual renewal fee. So they get to pay for 2 years. Whether they stay in business 2 years or not, they get to pay for it for 2 years, and it is non-refundable. Then if they come back the second year to renew, they owe nothing. So then they wouldn't owe, again, we're just going to have to keep track of where everybody is in the process. If they come back the third year, then it's a renewal fee. We did put in there the cap on the number of dispensaries, and then separate events or a special permit. So this is all in the registration ordinance. So the yellow columns are the ones that matter to us. Those are the fees we can charge. It's either half of the OCM license fee, or for initial fee, $500, or the renewal fee of $1,000. That's our cap. So regardless of the fact, and we're just going to ignore the fact that the OCM gets $70,000 for a medical combo license renewal fee, and we're going to accept our $1,000 and say thank you. We are recommending for the permit, a $250 permit application fee, and then just a $5,000, basically a security deposit, but it's an escrow. We don't use it, you get it back, but if we needed to have, for some reason, extraordinary city costs involved in your cannabis event, then we would take from that escrow. So this is the language from the statute that says you can have one for every 12,500 residents, but that is only for the dispensaries. You can have as many low potency, you can't put a cap on the number of low potency hemp edible retailers or the medical combo business license with a retail endorsement. So the cannabis event permit, we discussed this at the last workshop, and I think where I landed on this, again, the state law is not perfectly clear about what a cannabis event organizer looks like and what they do. But I think the way to interpret it is, as you suggested, it's not just going to be a cannabis event where you have basically the weed dabbler, where that's all it is. You're going to have the beverage guy that wants to come to one of your events, the Rivertown Days. They're going to want to come and have their cannabis beverage tent. And there may be several of them that want to come and have a vendor booth at your events. So I put, it should be on, the cannabis events are on private property unless approved by the council. So you have the ability to say, nope, this event is too family friendly. We don't think it's appropriate to have it at here. You can choose for specific reasons. Obviously, you have to have something to support it. But you could choose. Maybe this particular park you want to have it in doesn't have the ability to get the kind of security that we need for it. For whatever reason, if you choose that there isn't a good location in a public place to have a cannabis event, you can say no. You will have that ability case by case. So that's thing one. So it can be on public property, but it requires your approval. And the permit must come from the special event organizer. So it's not the vendor who wants to come and say, hey, I'm going to have an event, I want to have a booth at the event. They don't get to apply for the permit. It has to be the special event organizer that has a license from the Office of Cannabis Management. So they have to submit everything to you that they had to submit to them. And there's a very long laundry list of logistical things that they have to provide for that event. Exit and entrance for the event, like how people are going to be getting in and out, what you're going to do with your waste, who's going to be at the event, what vendors are you specifically going to have. It's a case-by-case basis. So that unfortunately, the way the law is written, the Office of Cannabis Management sees the license application of that organizer. They have to see it after we've seen it. Because one of the things that the organizer has to submit to them is proof of local permission. So you have to give it first, which is good because you know your parks better. You know your properties better. You know your events better. You know what will fit, what conditions should be put on that event. So you have to review it first. So everything that they would have submitted to the Office of Cannabis Management, they submit to you. So the laundry list is kind of long, and it is longer than probably what an alcohol or a beer tent has to submit, but that's because we have to. They're going to be submitting that to the state, and we don't want the state deciding what's appropriate for our parks. So that section has grown every time I read it, every time I review the statute, that special event permit section is kind of long, and we're going to have a special permit cannabis application that fits with all the things that they have to submit. So that's all outlined in the ordinance. They can have an event for up to 4 days. It doesn't have to be, but that's the maximum amount it can be. So we're going to ask, how many days is it going to be? Is there going to be on-site consumption? That, again, is up to the council's discretion. You don't have to allow on-site consumption, but you can. And then, as I said, an escrow fee for unforeseen expenses. And then there's a nice generic or other conditions as approved by the council, because it may just be a case-by-case basis. One size is not going to fit all for every event. So this, again, could be for a cannabis-only event, or it could be a vendor who wants to participate in a larger event. Either way, that permit is separate from the Rivertown Days. It could be at the same meeting, but it would be a separate permit within that permit. Does that all make sense this time? And I feel like that fits with what your intent was. Okay. And then just because we think that it's good, again, non-discriminatory odor ordinance applies to anybody that stinks. We don't want our businesses to be affecting other businesses, especially in the industrial park or even in a commercial area. It will require a specific, very objective technology to be used. I've put in there the Nasal Ranger because it is, as far as I know, the only kind of odor technology there is out there. But if there's something else, we'll use something else. A certain number of violations then designates them as a significant odor generator. They have to try to correct it. If they can't correct it, we can impose lots of administrative penalties. Now, I leave this penalty number is an option. The reason that it's high, normal administrative citation penalties are about $200. A $200 citation does not go very far with a business. They will pay it and they will continue to smell bad. Case in point, there's a significant odor generator in South St. Paul. Cross the bridge, you'll smell them. They don't care about the amount of administrative citations we issue to them. They just pay them and they continue to smell. So you've got to make the number, they have to feel a little bit of pain. So we're recommending at a minimum of a $10,000 administrative citation penalty. You're allowed to establish any fee that you feel is appropriate, but I'm open to suggestions.
Okay. Council?
Can I
Councilmember Lightfoot?
backtrack 1 second?
Yeah.
You brought something else up about, very organized notes, about medical marijuana. Does that follow the same 1,000-foot rule if you have a recreational marijuana dispensary
Yes.
and then a medical dispensary comes in as well? They have to be 1,000 feet apart?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
But we can't say no to the medical. is
You
that-
can't, right, there's no cap on medical.
Okay, but it does go into our zoning, our
Yes,
number of feet.
yep, the buffers,
Okay.
between businesses. Mhm.
Awesome. Secondly, anybody watching, Google nasal range, not nasal ranger. We checked this out. It's amazing. And it literally detects the level of odor in the air, similar to what I think Mr. Semsky's aware of with checking lumens, like when people complain about neighbors' lights.
Yes.
We can check how bright lights are. This does that for odor. It was amazing.
It is.
Can I make a motion now, or are you gonna talk some?
Well, are we okay with the $10,000 number? On the administrative citation? Because
Does
I didn't
anyone-
add that to the fee ordinance, so
Does
we'll have to.
anyone
add
have
it.
any opinions on that as far as, should that be a second citation? Like your first citation is, hey, you guys, we're getting complaints, there's a problem here. At least give them the ability to do what's right?
Under the ordinance,
Yeah.
first step is to notify them that they've reached the maximum number and make them meet with the city to try to come up with a solution.
Okay.
It's when they fail to comply with that solution,
Okay.
that's when the administrative citation. So we've already tried the negotiation and let's work it out and, put some kind of mitigation technology in your system, filters, whatever it is to make you stop stinking.
Okay.
And when you refuse or the filters go out and you don't change them,
Awesome, because that then goes with what we've been talking about, that we don't want to make it hard to do business here.
right.
But we want you to do good business. We want to be good business neighbors.
Right.
So, that being said, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to
So
make
here,
a mo-
oh, I know you wanted to say it, but I'm sure it meets all of these things.
well, what I'd like to, my motion would be to approve the first reading of zoning ordinance amendments and city code ordinance amendments for cannabis and lower potency hemp edibles as outlined by Councilor Lands.
That'll work.
We still have discussion. Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Corey, very much for all this extensive information. Two things I just wanted to clarify here. The slide prior, when we are talking about the odor ordinance, that only applies to manufacturing, correct?
No, it's an odor ordinance for any business in town.
But the way that we're thinking of this is, that's where it would most likely affect, no?
It actually, the plants can have a pretty pungent odor when they are blooming.
Okay.
And so it is, for this particular industry, there's two versions of odor. There's the obvious smell of a marijuana plant. And we have discovered with real-life experience at Leafline Labs that they have both odor issues because they do indoor cultivation. And so it permeates out of their walls.
Okay.
Or doors. And then secondly, the manufacturing process itself.
Okay.
Smells like a skunk.
Okay.
Which is not
And
awesome.
then a couple of slides, thank you for clarifying. And then a couple of slides prior where you were talking about manufacturing and the minimum parcel of land or area, that was it 10 acres? Is that what was listed for?
Cultivation is the
Cultivation,
only,
sorry.
yeah, cultivation is 20.
20 acres. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you, Your
yeah.
Honor.
Thank you, Councilmember Verichoff. There is a motion on the table. Councilmember House.
I have a question.
Seconds. Discussion, Councilmember Lightfoot.
To Councilmember Richard's question here, that ordinance, however, so that the smell is going to, it's not up there. It's going into the ordinance for all businesses, right?
Yes.
We're bringing it up now because it's come up in connection with marijuana, but going forward, I mean, and just thinking things like the Purina plant, the Multi-Meal plant.
Yes.
Right? So other things smell within a community. Okay.
Correct.
Just clarifying, that's just to add it to the whole thing.
If you had a rendering plant, for example.
Exactly. Right, thank you.
Your Honor.
Councilmember Fox.
Thank you. Is there, I'm so sorry, in the odor ordinance, is there something about malodorous or just any odor?
It's, so as Councilmember Lightfoot pointed out, it is an odor that reaches a certain sense on the nasal ranger that is offensive. So it's a measurement. It can't
not
be subjective.
Yeah,
Yep,
they're not like, well, I don't like how
Yeah.
Cheerios smell.
right. Cheerios or donuts
Yeah,
or, you fill in the blank. Right.
Okay,
It is
thank you.
that, and this ordinance, I think, as I indicated to you at the workshop, but just for, again, everybody to know, was challenged by a very large global company. And they took it to the federal district court for District of Minnesota, and it withstood the initial district court. They appealed the decision, and the federal appeals court said, not only is this ordinance non-discriminatory, but it is constitutionally valid. It has an objective test. It has due process baked into it. And so that is the model that we're using. So it is, I feel like it has withstood some pretty good judicial scrutiny. So if, we should be fine on its implementation. I feel like it's a good process. Again, it will require a little bit of, technology. We got to figure out how we pay for that. But once implemented, I feel like it will be a great tool.
Not that we want any code violations, but if we do, it looks to cover the nasal odometer.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
The fee that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
administering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, one citation would cover the cost of it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Any other discussion, Councilmember Pemble?
Going through the whole process and looking at what we've come to work through in this process and move ahead, not only just as the buffer areas, but the need that we have in this community to, along our corridors, Highway 55 and 61, we have properties that are available for businesses. And I think what we've done here so far tonight, up until voting, is that we've created a situation where we can be able to entice a type of business to come to our community, and these are the areas along the main corridors. My only concern in all of this is, as we put this all together, the legislature is going to meet again on January 20th, and after the last two sessions, the last 2-year sessions, and how things change, that we'll be coming back to deal with this somewhere along the way, I'm almost positive. But I do support moving forward with this.
Thank you, Councilmember Pemble. Motion first and second, any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails.
Thank you, Your Honor. The only other asterisk that we need to put on this is because the Office of Cannabis Management is not ready to issue any licenses, we're not ready to register any businesses, only a few have come in for conditional use permits, we do have some outstanding licenses. What do we do with them? So I'm going to recommend at final reading that we just extend their existing licenses. They already have conditional use permits, so they're good and valid. The off-sale, on-sale that are selling it today, I think we just let them, if they are operating and selling, I don't think we make them comply with any kind of a process because there isn't one from OCM yet. So we will, when OCM is issuing those low-potency hemp edible beverage retailers licenses, then we can register those businesses. But until then, I think we just let them be permitted uses and just let them do their thing. And for the existing licenses that we have, what is it, 3 or 4? I forget. Whatever, how many stars were on that map. We just extend their licenses until Office of Cannabis Management gets their act together. Oh, was that out loud?
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Okay, at this time, we will have a closed meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, subdivision 3C, to develop offers for purchase of real estate property located at 1292 North Frontage Road. We will meet in closed session to develop offers for purchase to real estate property water treatment plant 2 at 1292 North Frontage Road. Afterward, we will return to open session and may take action then. Closed session meeting is authorized by Minnesota Statute 13D.05, subdivision 3C. Will therefore seek a motion to move into closed door session at this time. Councilmember Leifeld, Councilmember Pemble. Additional council discussion? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. Okay. City Council will now move into closed session. No voting will occur and no action will be taken in the closed door session. I